I couldn't control how people treated me, so I thought, but I could control how hard I worked, how many titles I earned, how many certifications I collected. So I worked and I worked. I want you to picture something. You're standing in front of a buffet, a massive one, endless options, roles, titles, projects, committees, opportunities, achievements, relationships that need fixing, people who need saving, things that need doing. And you grab a plate and you pile it really high, not because you're hungry for all of it, but because somewhere in your mind, you believe if you just find the right combination, the right title, the right achievement, the right role, something inside you will finally click. You'll finally feel full. You'll finally feel that you have arrived. So, what do? You keep filling that plate, keep piling it up, you keep chasing, you keep reaching for the next thing. Hmm. But the plate gets heavier and you never feel full. And nobody asks you the question that might change everything. Are you chasing something or are you running from something? But here's what I've learned in my own life and in the lives of every woman I've ever coached. The chase is rarely about the destination. The chase is almost always about what we don't want to feel if we stop. And today, sis, we're going to talk about that because until you name it, until you name what you're running from, you'll keep circling. And everything you actually want, the peace, the joy, the fulfillment, it's not ahead of you. It's not in the next achievement. It's below the circle. It's below the circle. Welcome back to Below the Circle, episode 139. I'm Dr. Phyllis, your flight plan coach and co pilot. If this is your first time here, welcome. You're in the right cockpit. And if you've been here since last week, I'm glad you came back. Let's go deeper. So let's name it. What are you actually chasing? Because on the surface, it looks productive, it looks ambitious, it looks like a woman who has her life together. But underneath, here's what I found in myself and the women I coach. Hmm, she's chasing fulfillment. You're chasing fulfillment, not just success, fulfillment. That feeling that says, this is enough, I'm enough, I've arrived, You believe the next achievement, the next milestone, the next checkbox will unlock that feeling. It didn't for her, it didn't for me, and it doesn't for you. But you keep chasing the next one and the next. The next thing that often we're chasing is validation, looking for someone, a boss, a spouse, a parent, a community, a congregation to look at you and say, "You did it. You belong. You're worthy." And sometimes we get that validation, but it never lasts because external validation cannot convert to internal validation or internal peace. It's currency that doesn't transfer. Let me say that one again. External validation cannot convert to internal validation or internal peace. It's a currency that doesn't transfer. The next thing that often we chase is we chase permission, permission to rest, permission to take a seat at the table, be part of the discussion, be in the C suite, be in a particular meeting, permission to say, I've done enough. We are waiting for the world to give us clearance to land, but the world will never give it. Sis, I have to say that. The world will never give you permission to land. The world will always have one more thing for you to do. The next thing that we chase is a label, a title, a position, a credential, something we can point to and say, see, I'm legitimate. I belong here. I've earned my place. We're looking for a bucket to jump into. If it's not this bucket, it's that bucket or it's that bucket. An identity that the world recognizes because we feel that our internal identity feels too shaky to stand on its own. So here's the pattern. We're standing at that buffet of life, piling our plate with everything, roles, titles, achievements, service, sacrifice, trying to satisfy a hunger. But the hunger isn't for more food. The hunger isn't for more things to do. The hunger is is something and for something that the plate cannot hold. No plate can hold. And if this resonates with you, you know it. Deep down, you know. Because you've been piling your plate for years and you still feel empty. So, since the chase isn't really about what you're running towards, So you may ask, what is it about? So now I want to get real transparent. And I want to share a story with you that's real personal. As I said, real vulnerable, real transparent. Because as I prepare each week for you, I go deep within myself because your story has been my story. So, what is the chasing about? I can answer that question because I lived it. I started chasing early. In high school, I was one of the valedictorians. And even that, even standing at what at the time felt like the top, someone in my life found a way to make me feel like it wasn't quite real, like maybe I was a fraud. That smoldering feeling, I carried it with me into the next chapter. When I got to college, Stanford University, I looked around and realized everyone was their school's valedictorian. And suddenly the thing that had defined me for so many years didn't make me feel special anymore. I was just one of many. And that ego bruise, that not enough feeling, it didn't heal. It just went underground. And then life just kept piling up. I was one of a few black faces in many rooms. And this started not just in college, but through most of my childhood and formative years from an early young age. And for some, I was too black for some spaces and not black enough for other spaces and not white for the rest of the spaces. I didn't really fit neatly anywhere. So I adapted. I became dependent on the validation of others. My mom's love, older adults who saw me, mentors who believed in me because I didn't yet believe in myself. Wow. Speed forward that in my senior year at Stanford, I became a resident assistant, which is back in the day called house mom, but resident assistant is like the lead student in the house. Many times they're graduate students or seniors, can be seniors, but especially on the row, in the row houses, it was usually a graduate student. So as a senior, I was one of the younger ones. So as a resident assistant, I was all excited. And honestly, probably because I felt like achieving that title, along with having my own room, let's be honest, was an idea that I was going to be in a position where I'd be respected and people would come to me with their problems and I would help them. Well, you can imagine what's coming next. When I stood up for what was right in the house, and especially what I was going to do and not do, and what I was going to tolerate and not tolerate, a group of younger students revolted against me. I was barely 21 years old with shaky self confidence, and I gave my emotional power to them. The experience was traumatic. I somehow allowed them to be judge and jury. got to a point that they were even taking a vote, which was crazy in hindsight, a vote if I was to remain the resident assistant or not. Almost seems silly to think about it now because they really didn't have the power to do so. But at the time, it seems so real. And then I was angry with myself because I had given my power away so easily, or at least my thought of my power. Yet, needless to say, I had to stand up and we got through the year. There were some measures taken by my supervisor, and I still stuck to my convictions on advocating for those that needed to be advocated for on the behalf of. But I was definitely ready to get out of that row house. Oh my gosh. But I graduated from Stanford, as I say, thank you, Lordy. Okay. It wasn't cum laude, it was thank you, Laude. And I almost missed my medical school admission because my acceptance of admission letter, this is back in the day where we didn't have, it wasn't standard practice to fax or email, or there was no electronic process. So my acceptance of admission letter or form somehow got lost in the snail mail. And praise God, the staff who was the lead person over admissions, the processing admission operations, she called me in my room. Praise God for that. And she asked, "Well, Phyllis, are you coming?" You can imagine my heart, my everything dropped to the ground. Yes, I'm coming. I almost missed out on getting into medical school because the school that I wanted to go to, the letter had been lost in the mail saying, "Yes, I want to come." Wow. That was definitely, as I just said, a wow moment that could have derailed everything. Medical school was a grind. Imposter syndrome followed me through every exam, every rotation, every board examination, licensure examination. And admittedly, yeah, there were some I had to retake because I get test anxiety. The road was bumpy. And to add misery, more misery, I was briefly in a physically abusive relationship. Whew, that I thank God I got out of before I moved on to residency. But through it all, what did I do? I chased harder because in high school, achievement had been my identity. And when everything else felt unstable, my confidence, my sense of belonging, my place in the world, achievement was the one thing I thought I could count on, that I could control. I couldn't control how people treated me, so I thought, but I could control how hard I worked, how many titles I earned, how many certifications I collected. So I worked and I worked. I completed residency in internal medicine, found again my love for geriatric medicine, did that fellowship, did a primary care fellowship, got my master's in public health and epidemiology, got through my board certifications, got my dream job as a geriatrician, worked for years, started my family. And yes, I also experienced my dad's death, which rocked my world, but I kept grinding and working. Then, years later, came the betrayal. What I title the betrayal, if you see me with my air quotes, my boss. Now, understand, I'm telling you this in full transparency and vulnerability. And I want you just to hear this last part of this story because I have moved on and forgiven and been able to look at my role in the story. But I'm just giving this to you so that you understand me and how I spent many years chasing. So, my boss, a woman I considered a friend, I put her on a pedestal. I saw her as part of my family. To me, she was who I wanted to be like. So it came a point in time that she told me she wanted me to follow her in her position as department chair when her term ended. Oh my gosh, I was shaking, but I felt so honored that she'd want to pass the baton on to me. So I got to work and making sure my board certifications were up to date because, of course, to be the chief of the department, you got to have everything in place. So I wanted to be ready. And then the silence. I didn't hear anything more about it. I knew nothing about the process. So I just kept waiting to hear what the next step was, when we'd meet, so she could brief me on what I need to do. You know, did I need to meet with the medical director? I had no idea. So one day, I just kind of, in a way, lightly, kind of jokingly brought it up and said, "Well, I want to be ready when I take over for you." So let me back up for a minute. So I went to a meeting with the past, now the past, but the then medical director. And I thought he was calling me in to talk about this position. And so I'm all ready. And then I saw a colleague come in. I'm like, oh, well, maybe they're going for the position too. So then we went in to talk to him, and he really was asking about my boss. Like, I feel she was doing a good job and all of that? And I said, yes. And basically, the appointment was over. So I was confused. So back to me, just kind of jokingly bringing it up to her. And she told me that the medical director didn't think anyone was ready to take over. So she was staying in the position. I was crushed. I did not know what to think. And over time, it became evident as I understood the process more that she had told him I wasn't ready. The woman I trusted, the woman I thought who really saw me from all the time that we had spent together during work hours, outside of work hours, our families being together. Hmm. And wound, that old wound, you're not enough. It ripped wide open again, wide open again. The wound, the scab came off. And underneath it was every bruise I've been running from since I was 18 years old, really 17 years old, 'cause that's how old I was when I graduated from high school. Hmm. But did I stop? Did I sit with that pain? Did I allow myself to grieve? No. I ran even faster. New roles, new projects, community leadership, team mom, volunteer. I piled my plate even higher because if I stopped, I'd have to feel all of it. The betrayal, the anger, the grief of years spent chasing something that was never going to fill me. I eventually did become the chief of the department after what I call its own pledge period under a new medical director, and I'll save all that detail. It was its own reality TV show. But eventually I did become chief of the department and had to lead our department through the COVID pandemic as I continued to also deal with my own medical diagnosis of scleroderma. And in true Phyllis form, I was advocating for everyone, patients, staff, the marginalized, while completely disconnected from myself, from my own emotions, from my own needs. And I want you to understand that I was carrying a lot of hurt and things that I had seen being in the trenches, right? Into my leadership role. The scab had come back on, even though those emotions were smoldering underneath and adding more stress in the leadership position and navigating a pandemic that affected not only our daily work, but also each of the staff of the unknown and what they could be taking home to their families and what would happen. So I became even more disconnected and numb and on autopilot. To be honest, I didn't know who I was. I wanted to land. I needed to land. But stopping meant facing everything I'd been running from. So God, He pushed my ejector button or pulled the ejector lever on my seat in the cockpit. He said, okay, enough. He ejected me out of my own plane and I hit the ground hard. But here's what I know now, what I couldn't see from that higher altitude, that hard landing, sis, it saved my life. Because on the ground, bruised, humbled, still, because I was living so out of control. All the hurt and the pain and the emotions and the anger and the fatigue and the depletion and the numbness. The circling and circling. Praise God. He made me eject out of my own pilot seat, out of my own cockpit. I finally had to stop running. And I finally faced what I've been circling over for decades. And you know what? It didn't destroy me, it built me. It didn't destroy me, it built me. So here's the truth I want you to hear today, sis. You're not chasing something, you're running from something. Every shiny object, every new project, every title, every yes, when you meant no, every role you took on that wasn't yours to carry, it's not ambition, it's not drive, it's armor. It's the thing you've built to protect yourself from the hurt that's been chasing you. Maybe it's a bruise from childhood, a moment when someone told you that you weren't enough. Maybe it's a betrayal that ripped a scab off an old wound. Maybe it's imposter syndrome that's been whispering in your ear for decades. Maybe it's the accumulated weight of being unseen, undervalued, or overlooked in spaces where you poured everything out. And instead of turning around and facing it, instead of landing and doing the work, you keep flying because the altitude feels safer than the ground, because circling feels more productive than stillness. But here's what I need you to understand: the chase will never heal what you're running from. Let me say that again. The chase will never heal what you are running from. No title will make you feel enough if you don't already believe you are. No achievement will fill the void that only God and your own self acceptance can. No amount of piling your plate will satisfy a hunger that isn't for food, it's for home, for yourself, for peace, for presence. You cannot outrun your own hurt at 3,000 feet. Eventually, you run out of fuel, you run out of shiny objects, you run out of runway. And then you have a choice. You can crash like I did, hard, painful, ejected out of your own flight plan. Or you can choose to land now before God has to pull the ejection button, lever, or push the button. I want to say that one again. Or you can choose to land now before God pulls the ejection lever or pushes your ejection button. And here's the good news, sis. The part I wish someone had told me many, many years ago: it's never too late to stop. It's never too late to stop circling. It's never too late to stop chasing. It's never too late to put down that plate, to push back from the buffet of life and say, I'm done trying to fill myself this way. You don't have to hit the ground hard like I did. You don't have to wait for God to pull that lever or push that button. You can choose right now, today, to begin the descent on your own terms, to begin landing on your terms, to be able to fly, to really live life with intention, peace, joy, and authentic resilience. You have to first stop circling. And that starts with one honest question: what am I running from? Name it. You don't have to fix it today. You don't have to heal it tomorrow. Just name it. Because you cannot land somewhere you won't look down towards. And everything you've been searching for is below the circle, waiting. So here's what I want you to sit with this week: not the chase, not the plate, not the next shiny object that might be calling your name. Just this: what am I running from? And what would happen if I stopped running? You don't have to have the answer. You just have to be willing to ask the question. And if the answer scares you, good. That means you're getting closer to the truth. And the truth is where the landing begins. The truth is where the landing begins. Now, next week, in episode 140, I'm going to ask you another question. This one too might sting. Are you exhausted from your life, or from pretending your life isn't exhausting? Are you exhausted from your life, or from pretending your life isn't exhausting? That's gonna be going somewhere you might not expect. So make sure you're subscribed. And if this episode hits home, if you saw something of yourself at that buffet, piling the plate, running from something you haven't wanted to name, share it with the woman in your life who's doing the same thing. You know who she is. She's the one who's always starting something new, always busy, always fine, right? I'm fine. I'm good. Send her this episode. And as in every week, I am so appreciative of you spending this time with me, because I want to share with you my journey. I want you to start your landing before God has to eject you from your cockpit and give you that wake up call. This is Below the Circle with Dr. Phyllis, your co pilot and coach. And remember, sis, stop circling, start landing. I'll see you next week. Bye for now.